Hi everyone, welcome back to Reasonably Ad-Lib. This is episode 4.5, number 3 in the Explore series. I know the numbers are getting kind of confusing. This one is going to be a percussion special, hopefully not the last one. And we're going to have two wonderful percussionists talking to us today. In segment 1, we have Christopher Grant. He's going to talk to us today about percussion instruments, being a percussionist, and he's also going to share with us a piece that he wrote for Percussion Ensemble. We're going to talk through it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. In segment 2, we have another wonderful percussionist, Mami Ochi. She's going to talk to us a little bit about growing up in Japan, the early music education in Japan, and how she became a percussionist growing up. Again, if you like our show, please help us out a little bit by talking to your friends and family about us. You can also give us a like on Facebook and subscribe to us on iTunes and email us if you want to talk to us. Well, let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into segment 1. Hey everyone, I think listeners of this show are mostly is familiar with how an orchestra is organized. We have different sections within the orchestra. We have the string sections and the brass sections and the woodwind section. And there's also another section that a lot of times I think is being ignored, and they're always at the corner. They're behind everybody, so they do their own things. Percussion section, but it's one of these sections that, when everything goes right, nobody noticed, right? But if something goes wrong, everybody was like, "Hey, what's up there?" So, well, guess what? We have one of those guys at the studio today, Christopher Grant. He's a percussionist. He's playing in a lot of groups in town. In case you don't know either, we are based in Spokane, Washington. So, hey, Chris, what's going on?
Good morning, Kevin. How you doing?
Hey, okay. So, hey, just want to, being a tuba player, and I can say that even though we, a lot of times we do completely different things, but I can say I feel your pain, because I see a lot of times, you guys are just sitting on the back, just waiting for your moments. And, so do we. So do low brass players. We have to wait a lot, right?
Right.
So we kind of, in that way, we kind of are in the same arena, in terms of the waiting. But the really different part of it is, and I'm always really fascinated with this. When I pick up a tuba, I play the tuba. But when you guys have to do your thing, it can be like any of the 12 things that's like sitting in front of you, right?
Right.
So we can talk a little bit about how you mentally prepare to, take on the 12 different things in front of you.
Yes.
That to me, that would be really confusing, right? But you know what I'm saying, right? Because if I when I play, I pick up a tuba. That's it. Sometimes. Very rarely we have to double on a different instrument. I think sometimes in a big band or really rare occasions we have to double on the bass trombone or sometimes euphonium, but very rare. It almost never happened.
Right.
Right. But well, anyway, can you maybe we can talk about how you get started with percussion?
when I first started with music, I actually started on string instruments. I started on the viola in 4th grade, and I played for a couple years, but I just didn't quite find it enjoyable. So in middle school, I was in a music survey class just as an elective placement, and that's where I started learning about percussion.
Right.
I got roped into playing a cowbell in a parade to the Adams in the Adams Family song, and then from there it just kind of just got different opportunities. So I learned about different percussion instruments, and that's kind of where I started my career, I guess.
Right. Is there any aspects of percussion that attract you into being a full-time percussionist? Because percussion instruments are a little bit different from, I guess, maybe the rest of the instruments, as in, for other instruments like the viola, like the tuba, we play pitches.
Right.
But percussion instruments, especially that they're ones that you start with, you don't actually get to play the pitch.
Right. I'd say that when I was younger, I think just the rhythm and watching like a drum set player,
right,
and just all the polyrhythms and the hands and feet, I think that was really attracted me to drums. Or when I was younger and watching like different drumline type things or something where they're just playing lots of notes, and that active part I really enjoyed. I do wish sometimes I would have played a melodic instrument, because if I were to go to a recital and watch somebody on a violin or trumpet, it's a different beauty to it, and it's the different aspects where you don't get to do that in percussion. So sometimes I get a little bit jealous, and maybe sometimes instead of a truckload of equipment, if I could just put a trumpet case in my hand rather than a drum set, that might be more fun too.
Right. There's a path. Is there such a thing as a path you travel through the years when you're growing up as a percussionist? As in, you started with the really basic ones, the snare drums, and then you progress to maybe more involved instruments such as the marimba.
Right. I definitely and depending on different parts of town, it's most people are going to start on, like you said, the snare drum, and most schools would like students to start on the bells. So it's kind of like some beginning band programs won't start kids on saxophone. They want you to get a start on the clarinet, so there's less instruments to deal with as a teacher for that beginning point. But you definitely learn your snare drum, and sometimes the bells, sometimes not, and that kind of leads to the basic instruments for your generic concert band or generic orchestra part. So I would say that snare drum, followed by like the bass drum and the crash cymbals, and some techniques on tambourine and triangle. And then everything else is kind of around here is as you need to know basis as you get older into more advanced pieces. And personally for myself, I did mostly drums, and I would cover some mallet parts, but I never really learned any of the intricacies of technique or musical theory basically until I got to college. I mean, I could play a couple scales in high school, but I was always playing drum set or percussion, like membrane drums, without pitch. So I never really delved into that until I was 18.
Wow. Okay. So, I always, too, really curious with that, because, for like a tuba player, like I don't even know is there a name for us, like percussion versus others?
Others?
For the
others. We're the others. Actually.
For the instruments that deal with pitches primarily. We have to go through scales.
Right.
How we read music is you have to learn clefs. You have to learn, ledger lines. What does that mean? Blah 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 blah. For percussion, that's how was that done? Do you like when you look at like a treble clef? This line means that note is a G. Right. Do you guys actually got to deal with that too much, or?
I would say in schools you're always taught some of those theory lessons, but it's never, it's not quite the same because we're not putting it into practice on a daily basis. So I would say that I was very familiar when I was younger, and I could, every good boy does fine or face, all cows eat, excuse me, all cows eat grass. But I think just the getting to the reading portion of it, it wouldn't be the same because it's not used all the time, or we wouldn't have licks under our fingers or our sticks on a keyboard just because that wasn't our daily activity. So I would say I was I would pick up quickly, but again, when I was younger, the reading part of it, I wouldn't be as quick, but I would theoretically understand it, but I just wouldn't be able to put it into practice.
Right. And to me, percussion music, it's totally different. To me, percussion music is like I'm reading a thing in like a Scandinavian language. I can recognize elements of it, but it totally doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I hope this is not offensive to say, right? But you can, the A is A, the E I can see, the D is a D, but once you put it together, it's like, whoops, I don't know what this means.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
it can even be tough on percussionists now. It's quite interesting playing new music or music from younger composers, just because even for us, the notation system is, obviously the rhythms are the same, but just the way where people place it, you'll look at 5 different drum set charts, and some people will write it differently, so you have to decipher and get used to how certain people write, or it's even difficult for us sometimes because it's not always the same. It's not as standardized as some people think.
Right. So going back to the path. Right. So the more elementary instruments, percussion instruments, are the snare drums and the bass drum. And then once you go to college, what other stuff do you go into? What other instruments do you go into?
That's
more advanced ones.
Yeah. So, basically, for a lot of students, like you said, you're used to playing maybe drum set and snare drum, but by the time you get to college, and I guess it depends on what school you go to. If you were to follow a drum set path, some schools wouldn't make you, but when I was an undergraduate, I became proficient in like concert snare drum. That's a different animal than like the marching snare drum and the drum set, and then the keyboards are all different, because if you thought about it, they're all kind of similarly set up like a piano, but the way you play a set of orchestra bells versus a set of chimes with the different implements, or the marimba, the way you strike a xylophone versus a marimba or a vibraphone, there's that whole family of the idiophones. Again, drum set, and that varies quite differently depending on the styles and genres, jazz to rock. Hand drumming is a whole different aspect. All the different world cultures, sometimes even that is there's big differences between, even though there's quote-unquote Latin music, the music of Brazil is quite different than Cuba, which is quite different than African drumming. Or I've even done, we've done some Chinese music with Chinese cymbals and gongs with an erhu, an ensemble. So that was just even the way you approach different things. So there's so many different families, or the accessories. How do you strike different types of bells, like a cowbell or an agogo or whatnot. There's so many. It's pretty overwhelming to think that, like you said earlier, if I learned to play the tuba, I'm going to go through my major and minor scales and different chords. But when you play the percussion, you're expected to know that all on the keyboards and all these different rudiments and, 4 or 5 different families of instruments.
Right, too. Because like you said, it's not it's not a set amount of things. Any moment you are expected to play something new. And there are a lot of research going into it. And it's like every day you wake up, I feel like, you have something new to learn.
Right.
Because it will never end. Because, once you're familiarized with, the percussion instruments that you have to play in, say, a Brahms symphony. And what are some of those? Like, I'm pretty sure this is the snare drums, and then some of the triangle, some of the standard ones.
Well, yeah, if you were to look at the orchestra scene, the symphony scene, a lot of the literature, it's not going to be as exciting until you get to 20th century music, because a lot of the material was quite limited to just timpani per se.
Right, like the other night I saw the Mozart, once again. A symphony concert with Mozart and Beethoven. Most of the concert is just timpanist. Right. And then snare drums just,
quite some time later.
Right.
You'll see crash cymbals and triangle, and then as we get further, bass drum and snare drum. Right. And then, you get into 20th century or Bernstein or some other fun different things. And that's a whole another animal. But you know, I mean that's what it comes back to, I guess. The diversity in learning all these different instruments is tough, but at the same time, I feel really comfortable because a lot of different people will be able to call me. Like you said, I play in a lot of different groups, you know, whether it's the brass band or the symphony group or a pop group. I feel so diverse that people feel comfortable calling because I'll be able to do things versus, you know, you could argue about wind players and being able to play classical versus jazz or whatnot.
Right. There's so much stuff that go into it too. Because when I was in college, the percussion professor, you know, I'm sure he knows, you know, everything. He can play everything at a professional level. But the thing that he's famous for, as I heard it, is the suspended cymbal. And you know, he can, you know, I mean, he can do so many things on a suspended cymbal. Different sound, hit it differently with different mallets, and that's just so fascinating to me because there's just so much variations,
right?
And a lot of times, you know, it's so niche. There's a sound that is perfect for that occasion, but once you maybe use a mallet that is like what's the scale? A little bit harder, or
you know, that's another one where it's. I would say of the 4 or 5 major stick companies, everything varies. But like you said, yesterday we were sitting in the wind ensemble at Eastern Washington University.
Right.
And before we just had, the school only owns 2 or 3 beaters, but I brought out a set of one that's specifically for rolls, one for heavy punches, one for some light things, and some different mallets. And it was just amazing that even on a bass drum, in one concert, you can use 5 or 6 different types of beaters just to get the appropriate sound.
Right. Just you guys are like trumpet players with the bag with the mouthpieces. You guys have the bag with like all the sticks.
Oh yeah.
Right. So you do a lot of private teaching too.
I do. Right? Yeah, I do.
So do you? I'm sure when kids come in, when you know the beginners, a lot of them just want to beat the heck out of something. Right. A lot of percussion players. And then. You were saying that you don't really get to do a lot of the music theory stuff until you were in college, and I'm sure when you do teaching now, you want to introduce that music theory material a little bit earlier to your students because it's something good to know anyway, right?
I would say as far as that goes. I kind of look at different students and maybe what their outcome is. I definitely have a wide variety. So I need to think about, I have some students that specifically just want to come and learn drum set and just from their background or knowing what their opportunities are, maybe learning to read or learning the orchestral side, maybe not even, it's not worth their time because they're never going to go down that road. So depending on that, so that might be one type of student where we would get into styles, maybe just using our ears. Then the percussionists, you know, another tough factor for learning theory and keys and scales is a lot of these students, like a marimba, if a student wants to practice at home, sometimes these instruments are prohibitive just because of cost.
Right.
So I'll have a student that will want to learn, but they don't have the funds to afford a $3,000 instrument at the get-go. So that's another one. So my keyboard students, the marimba and whatnot, we'll get a lot of opportunities with those specific students to start talking about, you know, how to construct scales and chords. But it's a lot more limiting than the snare drums.
Right.
We'll get into a lot of, you know, understanding about rhythm and breakdowns and subdivisions, but it'll just be a different aspect.
Right. I guess there's a commonality, is that even such a word, here with tuba and percussion instruments, as in a lot of these instruments are expensive.
Right.
And, you know, for tuba, right, I mean, a lot of schools, they would have B-flat tubas. So high school, rarely they would have a C, but a lot of schools would have B-flat tubas.
Right.
It's just like, you know, something cheaper, and it's just good to start for kids to start with. So, a lot of times when kids want to do a solo piece, and that solo piece is better suited for, you know, F tuba, E flat tuba, and where the school doesn't have it.
Right.
And a good F and good E flat costs what nowadays, like 8 or 9,000, 10,000 US.
Right.
So they don't have access to a tuba like that. And that kind of create a problem. Well, then the problem is, well, are they not supposed to learn the piece because they don't have the right equipment, or are they supposed to learn the piece with the wrong equipment?
Right.
And I guess that maybe that's somewhat equivalent in the percussion world, because they are you want them to learn a piece on a specific instrument, but that instrument is not readily available.
Right.
At least they can't take it home with them.
Exactly.
Right.
And that'll be oftentimes like a marimba solo. I'll try to get students to start a marimba piece, but maybe they only have access to a xylophone, which it's very similar, but like the octave displacements there, so everything will be heard at
Right.
an octave to 2 octave higher, depending on the range
Right.
on the xylophone. So you're not going to get the same tone. So we go through some of that too, or a vibraphone that's metallic. It has sustain, and a lot of students don't have that. So
Right.
yeah, literature, you can be limited big time on the literature.
Right. I think I also I was talking to another percussionist recently, and the xylophone and marimba, and because I just don't know enough, it's really confusing to
Yeah.
me. It's like they all kind of look the same, but yet they're different.
Right.
So, what's a practice session for a percussionist like? Because you're for us, right? We pick up the tuba, and
Right.
then we play the tuba.
Well, I would say we primarily use our hands and wrists. So for me, I'd say the common thing would be, although it's going to be somewhat different taking the way you strike a snare drum versus a xylophone versus a timpani, just that basic structure of getting your hands moving. I think the common place for me is I like to get a good workout with my hands on a daily basis. And then after that, after you learn the different techniques on some of the auxiliary instruments,
Right.
I'll have to tailor my practice if I'm doing a specific gig to, a different piece. If we were doing some Carmen highlights this summer, and so there is some different parts with castanets and tambourine that I would want to go over. But the facility for some of those instruments is not as difficult. So I would say that the bulk of my practice time, where I like to spend it, would be on keyboards, on scales,
Right.
and whatnot, and some snare drum warming up, and then after that, drum set, the independence that it takes. So that would be my three probably primary areas: snare drum and drum set and keyboards.
Right. Right.
And depending on the amount of time I have, that could be a long day.
But do you have to, for something like the triangle? Do you actually practice that, or because?
Well, that comes back to like you were talking about earlier with trumpets and mouthpieces or beaters, finding just the right, and that's another cost inhibitive activity of. Although it's a triangle and everybody just thinks about that high pitched ping, it's amazing how many different triangles there are.
Right.
I'd say at home I have about 6 different ones, and trying to match the right heaviness to the piece and the right beater to get the right sound and how bright or not bright you want it. That's probably where I spend more of my time, is like, what kind of sound can I get out of this rather than learning the part itself.
Right. So it's more in the prep. The work is more in the prep work.
Yeah.
That actually doing it, because for triangle hit, right? A lot of times you get like one chance.
Right.
At a show.
Exactly.
So it better happens like perfectly.
Yes.
And in order to happen perfectly, you have to do all the prep work to make that moment just happen.
Exactly.
It's just fascinating stuff. And one of the really nutty moments that I witnessed is, of course it's going to be nutty because it's Petey Coo Bach. There's a Petey Coo Bach piece that he pretend that there's an accident in the percussion section. So they stack up a bunch of chairs and stuff like books and stuff,
Right.
and they accidentally tip it over and make like a bunch of noise, right? So ideally there would be, little things all over the place, and they would make once you knock that thing over, there will be continuous noise for like 15 seconds, right?
Right.
So what's the craziest thing you get involved with percussion?
Well, I'd say one of the most wild things was about 10 years ago with the Zephyr Music Group. That was the contemporary music ensemble in Spokane. We played a piece called Ballet Mécanique by George Antheil.
Yeah.
And it was, I guess it was just kind of crazy because just being younger in my career, it was I want to say somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes long. But
Right.
for a younger percussionist, not two bars were on the same time signature. So it took that was a lot of preparation. And for some of that with percussionists and the music, it's really difficult. Like simple things like page turns become quite difficult. So sometimes in the percussion world, we end up taking our music and getting cardboard and making like poster boards of 6 to 8 pages because
Right.
you can't play and turn or music's not written correctly. But that piece was fun. It had so much prepared piano and different percussion pieces and fire alarms. Like we had to find a way to rig a fire alarm and get the power to that, or just
You guys are like combat engineers.
Yeah,
You have to
I
make
mean-
up your own things.
different instruments. Or there's taking a super ball mount where you take a bouncy ball, a super ball, and you can make some really interesting sounds on a gong,
Right.
or making whale call sounds with a pair of crash cymbals or eerie, like the effects that you hear in the movies sometimes that are related to percussion. I've got to play a piece years ago where we got in the rafters of this recital hall and used crystal glasses at specific pitches.
Whoa.
And you get your hands and you just run your fingers
Oh,
around
yeah.
it. And there was about 4 of us with about 12 different pitches with an ensemble on stage and us upstairs, and it was just kind of eerie. So there's always interesting colors.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is maybe a little wild, but another thing that I didn't see it, but I heard about it.
Right.
Is there was a piece, somebody rigged a 6 or 8 washing machines together with different pitches, and
Really?
they somehow use a computer to program the machines to turn on
Wow.
and off. But it's still a lot of work, right?
Right. That is.
A lot of work.
Do you
Yeah,
have to buy those and rent them? How did that work?
I have no idea. I can check. But now I know you compose too, right? You write for percussion instruments too, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I saw it a couple of nights ago at the was it a premiere or
That was I think the third group to have played that piece, Chante Molto Allegro. I originally wrote that in 2008. The literature for percussion is maybe much like other instruments where there's a void of things in the middle. There's lots of very intricate, difficult pieces and a plethora of very easy pieces, but you never can quite find the right piece for the right person sometimes. So I had a group of 4 students that were juniors and seniors in high school, and they wanted to compete at the solo ensemble contest in the small percussion ensemble.
right?
So Central Valley High School and those students commissioned me to write a piece for them. So it was just to kind of do a little bit of challenging for them, a little bit of mallet and all the accessories, just to kind of make sure that they were up to snuff on all the techniques, and
Right.
a little bit of melodic content. Because again, like we talked about earlier,
Right.
sometimes you get in the ruts of being a drummer or being a marimba player or being a
Right,
timpanist. So that had a little bit of variety for them. And then it was played again a couple of years ago with the British brass band percussionist, and then we did a little bit of editing for a 5th player for the Gonzaga University concert.
Right. So let's listen to this piece. We actually there's for the ethnomusicology guys out there. This is a field recording. So let's listen to this. Hey, nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. So is there a story behind this, or is that when you're composing it, is there a movie, or is that a
That particular one, I guess I just was thinking I wanted to have a couple different moods to express,
right?
and then some opportunities, not for a solo per se, but there's a little bit of call and answer between the instruments. So I think in that particular one, again, expressing a couple moods and then the opportunity for some play between the instruments. And that's basically, and then I just kind of started and didn't like this, like that, and some of the programs now. I mean, there's always been like MIDI sounds, but there's been a couple new programs in the last decade, so you can hear things played back on your computer. So it kind of makes it a little bit easier to try the different ideas, and I just kind of went with it, and there we are.
Right. I'm gonna say something. Maybe I hope it's not offensive.
Okay.
Right. But percussion. Well, first of all, I love it because it's something totally different, and it's not brass. It's not like a brass quintet piece that you listen to certain things. When you listen to a percussion ensemble piece, it kind of, to me at least, it kind of flip your brain a little bit, as in, okay, I don't know what to expect here.
Right.
But so far the percussion ensemble pieces to me, I can say all of it that I have. I mean, maybe I'm just not my brain is not tuning to the correct wavelength on this. But all of them sounds like either like the end of the world to me, or it's like really mysterious or something. I mean, like now your piece, right? What I just heard, the really active stuff,
Right.
it really sounds like something,
Well, yeah.
something's gonna fall down, and the more with the gong and the I'm sorry, what do you call that with the gong?
Oh, they were. There was a couple
The wind
sounds.
chimes.
There was the wind chimes and some gong scrapes where you take a triangle beater on the gong.
Yeah, and once I hear that, right away, what pops up in my head is like a rainy night in a graveyard. Something crazy is going to happen.
I would say, I would have to agree that there's a large amount of pieces that are very dark in percussion.
Right.
But I guess I'm having a very difficult time of thinking of quote unquote pleasant pieces that come to mind. But I would say a lot of the pieces are, not necessarily dark all the time, but I think the familiarity with the instruments and just not having like the staple instruments of, when you're hearing those, yeah.
Well, a lot of those, I'm pretty sure somebody did research on this, but when the stuff that you experienced when you were younger, really kind of shape what you think of things later, right? I guess a lot has to do that little dark percussion, that connection, percussion music, percussion ensemble music lead to, apocalyptic thingy. Has a lot to do with when I was younger. When I was a kid in Hong Kong, right? When the government sponsored program, they always invite Japanese high school bands to perform, and when we played together, and one of their percussion ensemble did a piece that quiet, silence, and then the first thing they ever did is they have a player just bang the hell out of a gong so loud that I was totally freaked out by that, right?
Wow.
I think that has to do with that. And then they do a lot of kind of similar to your piece, with the really hot, drums going. And then for some reason that kind of scared me a little bit. And then when I was a kid, and yeah, and then that, anyway, that's my problem to deal with, right? Now, am I correct to say that percussion pieces are, if a person is used to, it's like a general audience, if they're used to pieces like Mozart or Beethoven or Bach. A percussion ensemble piece is more demanding on them to
As a listener?
to approach it.
It will be a lot different. I mean, if we just even thought of, and this is the most interesting topic when I teach, like where does the wind player start their warm up every day? Generally with like a long tone sequence,
Right.
So you're just never going to get. I mean, we can roll on a percussion instrument,
Right.
but with the exception of a sustain of a timpani with one stroke, you're always going to hear multiple beatings in something, or like a gong will ring. But that's a different feeling on your ear than hearing a string quartet or a brass quintet and something lush and just a chordal type just held out. And
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a see, I feel like whatever word I put in there is going to be wrong. Like in the word I'm thinking is like in a conventional kind of classical piece, you hear the movement. A lot of it has to do with melody, melodic. But the bulk of the movement in the music is harmony. And you listen to tonality, you listen to different chords, how the chords move. You don't really have that. If a listener is expecting that movement for a percussion ensemble piece, it's just not there.
Right.
So
for a lot of things, I mean, you'd have to explore some contemporary percussion ensemble composers like David Gillingham. He's a very big in the wind band literature. So some of his pieces will have more content. Or I thought of The River of Life by David McCarthy. That's a more upbeat piece. But but in a lot of times you're not going to have that conventionalness, but there are quite a few. If you wanted to listen to marimba quartets and ensembles, they will take some standard. Well, I wouldn't say standard repertoire, but like even Eric Whitaker, he's a choral and wind composer. Take his types of pieces and transfer it. So I guess just depending. You kind of have to research a lot more, and like iTunes, you can find a lot of small ensemble repertoire on iTunes as far as string quartets and brass quintets. But if you were to go search percussion, you're going to be a lot more limited, and that goes for access for students and learning pieces. That it's the nobody in Washington really carries a stock of where you could just go look and check out. It's all finding recordings and ordering from out of state.
Right. How do you educate somebody to listen to a percussion ensemble? It's like if there's a percussion piece, percussion ensemble piece, and somebody keep asking you, "Hey, when are the string section coming in to cover the melody?" How do you educate that person to listen to tune their brain into listening to a percussion ensemble piece?
Well, like we mentioned before, as far as the strings aren't coming in today. No, I would just say that for anybody listening to a new piece, and it's kind of the challenge. Or I can remember I love jazz, but when I was 14, 13, if you made me listen to like a jazz quartet or Charlie Parker, I would have lost my mind, because I wasn't accustomed to or didn't like listening to a soloist take a chorus, another chorus, and another chorus. So it's just one of those things of, for listeners, especially when I'm working with younger percussionists, is trying to find pieces that are maybe quote unquote catchy or maybe more exciting or different things, so you can start building upon some of those prior experiences and then making some comparisons. But I just, with anything, just telling someone to just open their ears and kind of wipe the slate clean and just not have an expectation or whatnot.
Yeah, so listen to the nuances in terms of everything.
Well, I mean, when you listen to Beethoven or Mozart, like you were saying, you kind of know what you're expecting.
Right, exactly.
And if you were to listen to, Carl Nielsen, it's very exciting, but a lot different. Or just the kind of the progression along with I mean, we can't really call it classical music because it spans so many centuries that it's changed. But, to the general listener, just, it's just new.
Well, the exciting thing to me is, there's so many. The percussion world is so big.
Right.
I mean, even for like what we were talking about as suspended cymbal, where just off by a 5 millimeter, where you hit the thing,
Right.
from the center.
Yes.
The sound is so different. So every time, even with very conventional pieces, or some of the more modern ones, like some of the Shostakovich that has more variety of percussion instruments involved. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, I guess what I'm getting at is, when you listen to a Mozart piece with strings, just string orchestra,
right.
There are a lot of interpretation stuff you can do, dynamics and here and there, nuances. But you are expecting you're not expecting anything crazy to happen.
Correct.
But for even a frequently played symphony like Symphony No. 5, Shostakovich, if you just focus on listening to percussion, different recordings sometimes will have like a totally different take on the percussion instruments.
Yes, very much so.
Stuff like that. So that's really fascinating stuff,
to
me at least. So hey, Chris, thanks again for coming in today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you very much.
It's really great stuff. You open up. Hopefully, the listeners would open up a huge world for our listeners to start exploring.
Right.
Different
new avenues today.
New stuff. Well, thanks again. Please come back to the show. Thanks.
Have a great one. Bye.
Yay. Hey everyone, welcome back to Reasonably Ad-Lib. We in previous edition of the show, we talked to I don't know if everybody remember Julian. He's from Colombia, and we all the time I'm trying to find out, because we are based in the United States, and I'm always really curious about how other people from around the world get into music, or how they start with the music education. So one of my really good buddy, she is a percussionist, and she's from Japan. So we have her here today, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about the music education in general, and the music education in Japan. Her name is Memi Ochi, and she's a percussionist. And here's another thing too: percussion instruments. If you ask me, it's one of these things within the musical realm that it's a lot of times being ignored, but because of various reasons. So depends on whether we have time to get into it or not today. But I would also want to talk to her a little bit about the percussion, how she started with percussion instrument and percussion stuff in general. Hey, Memi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, okay. So, hey, talk to us a little bit about the Japanese education system. As in, is it different from the U.S., or how, if it is different, how different it is?
Okay, the basic education system is basically similar and very much the same, because both our educational system is based from German educational system way back when.
Right.
So our mandatory education is from first through ninth,
Right.
elementary school to junior high,
Right.
and that's the so-called free education that everybody is required,
Right.
and education is going to be given free. And then in addition to that, high school is from 10th through 12th, only 3 years.
Right.
And then preschool, kindergarten is combined as we call them kindergarten.
Right.
And that's usually 4 and 5 year olds.
Right.
And some kids start at age 3. So
Right.
they might do 3 year or 2 years of kindergarten.
Right, so kind of the same over here because I know different school districts have different things going on, but I think in general, grade 1 through I would say 5. Is that right? It's elementary, and my band director friends are going to be like, no, that's not true. But we have middle school with high school, and a lot of times like 3 years here, 3 years there. So I know in Hong Kong we run on a different system. We kind of run on the British system, as in 1 through 6, and then it probably changed since then, since I was a kid. And that was a long time ago. So yeah, we're 1 through 6. So now, is music part of how does music education fit into this system?
Music education is, well, kindergarten, it's like everything.
Right.
Everything starts with music and everything ends with music.
Right.
When we go to the school, first thing we do is good morning songs.
Wow.
And last thing we do is goodbye song.
Wow.
And anything from eating lunch to putting toys away or to going outside for the physical ed or doing this and doing that, everything has a song.
It's like a musical.
And
It's like everything you go to school is like a musical.
yeah, it's almost like that. And
Wow.
then we teach solfege in Japan, fixed do solfege.
Right.
So lots of these little kids, like any of the nursery tunes that like Twinkle Twinkle or whatever, all the little kids, they can sing in solfege.
Wow. So it's like it's actually integrate music into everyday
Yes.
life and everyday going to school.
Yeah, that's how we start out.
Wow,
And then like I was in the marching band
Right.
in kindergarten.
Marching
So
band.
Yeah, I started out playing snare drum.
Wow.
And I became a drum major.
Right.
So it's kind of like, little kids. It's just cute. I
Yeah.
think it's just a little marching band with snare drum, bass drum, cymbals, and like I think little thing called pianica. It's a little keyboard that like octave and half keyboard that you blow
Right.
air into.
We had those.
So
We had those.
yeah.
So was that the music that we were talking about, like elementary education here? Was that part of? Was that that's a now the marching band part of it? Is that compulsory, or every kid has to do that, or is that in addition to or extracurricular?
Well, the kindergarten marching band is for everyone. I think everyone has to do it, whether or not it's the drums or that part is mandatory.
Right.
And some kids who are more active or who can do little more, then they might do baton or color guard kind of stuff, and it's kind of cute, like us 4 and 5 year olds doing
Right.
that.
Right.
It's not like super special, or like they don't do any of the super difficult stuff, but they do manage like simple songs with simple rhythms.
Right.
And up to 16th note they manage.
So they make an effort to get everybody started on some kind of musical training.
Yes.
Right. Is it I know in Hong Kong, for some reason, most of the parents will have their kids start piano lesson when they're really young. Is there such a thing in Japan, or is that the same, or is there a thing for parents to start their kids on piano lesson early?
I think in Japan it might have been the parents that started, but I think it's mostly kids driven now. That generally we encourage kids to start music early, like 3,
Right.
if not 5. And
Yeah.
then anything after 5 is like, oh, you started late kind of
Right.
category.
Right.
But like there are so many like Kawaii and Yamaha music schools
Right. Right.
that kids can go to, or any neighborhood private teachers. And learning music culture is big. And even if parents aren't too excited about like having their kids take lessons, most of the time kids want to take lessons because my neighbor so and so, good buddy so and so is taking the lessons,
Oh.
or they're running this special promotional with those colorful pencils
Right.
and special whatever, that if you start lessons and the kids want to start. So at one point or another, I think kids end up taking lessons or wanting to take lessons.
Right. The marching band in the elementary school that you mentioned, is there? Do you have a choice in terms of instruments?
Oh,
Or you get
elementary
a
school. I was marching band thing that I was talking about was in kindergarten.
right.
In elementary school, general music ed is just singing and solfege, and they do instrumental music ed from 3rd through 6th grade,
Right.
and that's everybody learning soprano recorder.
Right.
And 5th and 6th grade extracurricular activity, they could be marching band, but
Right.
it depends on the school that you go to.
Right.
If there are a teacher who can teach that particular thing, then there will be a marching band.
Right,
But
right.
if there isn't, then there might not be.
So in general, is there a choice of instruments? Can you choose your own instrument, or do they assign instruments to you, or
If you
there
go
is
to
no
the
choice?
marching band,
Yeah.
it depends. Oftentimes, you get to voice your preference. Like my junior high band, and that's an extracurricular.
Right.
And I went in, and I just wanted to be with my friends. So like, and then my friends wanted to play flute.
Right.
And so like we all say, okay, first choice is flute. But my dad played flute, and I had flute at home. And my friends' parents didn't have flute. And then there are so many kids that wanted to play flute.
Right.
They franked out of the first rounds of audition.
Oh.
And I was in the second round of audition.
Right.
And only reason I was in the second round was because I already had a flute.
Right.
And then as I went into the second round audition, I said, wait, all my kids already went to percussion, so I want to play percussion with them. I don't want to play flute.
Wow.
So, but so you can voice your opinions,
Right.
but it is assigned in the end.
Okay.
So it's not like U.S. schools, like in the band class, you have like 52 flutes and like one horn.
Right. Right. Well, over here, sometimes they do nudge you into certain instruments. Well, I'm a tuba player, right? So I know all about trying to encourage kids to
Yeah.
to go a certain way in terms of choosing instruments.
Yeah.
So,
At the end of the day, it's downright assigned
Right.
in Japan.
so higher level, we're talking about like middle school. Do they call it middle school with or junior high?
Junior high.
Junior high, right? So they is there organized band? Do they start actually having symphonic bands or higher level music education?
No, all the bands are extracurricular. In general music ed, junior high level,
Right.
Instrumental ed is limited to alto recorder that everybody plays.
Oh.
And then solo singing and
Right.
solfege,
Right.
and then choir. So the choir is going to be new thing in junior high.
So in terms of organized music education, band instruments, they don't really start until junior high.
No, if you do marching band in elementary school,
Right.
you can start in 5th grade.
Okay, but you mentioned that band, symphonic band, it's extracurricular.
Yes.
So it's not part of a school class.
No.
It's all after
It is
school.
never part of a school curriculum
Wow.
in Japanese educational system.
Well, that is amazing because I kind of actually got a couple of stories to tell here. When I was a kid, I was in a government-sponsored program in Hong Kong, and every year they would invite Japanese high school band to as the guest band, and they are amazing. I mean, their quality is super amazing.
That's
I mean,
because they
are-
practice all the time.
Yeah. So, and the other thing is, the other story is they are good, right? And several years ago, and this is around here in the U.S., and they also invited a Japanese band, high school band, to perform with this high school, local high school band, and again, the quality of the music, it's amazing. And they don't just play really well. They of course they play really well, but they are also good performers, as in they know how to actually run a performance.
Yes, they
You know,
do.
I remember what happened was they have a before the actual the entire band play their pieces. They have like kind of a welcoming guest thing when people are going into the hall, and there was a saxophone quartet playing a thing. I forgot what it is, and these kids are running the show. No adults was there on stage with them, right? But they are running the show. So they're highly trained, they're highly motivated, and they're amazing musicians, right? And so, and all that is extracurricular. It's not
Yes.
like they don't get a grade
No.
from school. That is amazing stuff. And you were saying that how's practicing over in Japan? I mean, do they have to just hammer kids to practice, or is the culture a little bit different?
Culture is a little bit different. If you are in extracurricular band, because there is no in the system or in the curricular
Right.
in the curriculum band. Like when I was in junior high, say like school, like first period started at 8:30.
Right.
You can get to school as early as 7.
All right. Wow.
So you can practice on your own between 7 and 8:30. And then after school, either school gets out, depends on the day, 2:30 or 3:30. If it's on Saturday, then it's noon. And then you can stay at school until 5 in the wintertime, until 6 in the summertime.
Right.
So you can get like 2 or 3 hours practice time, built-in practice time every day.
Right.
And and then weekend rehearsal was normal. So like Sunday.
Hold on.
Like Sunday morning, 10 to 4.
Weekend rehearsals.
Yeah.
That would never happen here.
Yeah, like Sunday, 10 to 4.
Yeah. Wow.
And, or like, 9 to 4.
So none of these kids, even though I remember they wear school uniforms when they perform it, they don't get a grade. There's no music grade.
It has nothing to do with grades.
Wow. Wow. Hey, and this is a tougher question. I'm going to ask you a tougher question. What's behind this motivation? Because, I'm sure you have students here, and a lot of times you have to really bring it home in terms of, hey, you need to practice. You really need to just emphasize practicing. A lot of kids just don't do it, right? What's different? What is the difference in terms of motivation? Because it sounds like in Japan, in the normal circumstances, kids would just do it by themselves. Right?
Yeah, I think the difference really is because it's not part of your school, it's not part of your grades,
Right.
and the kids who are in the band because they want to be in the band.
Okay.
And not only that, it's like old school affair, so it's not like 7th grade band or 8th grade band.
Right.
So when you are in there,
Right.
you are playing along with your juniors or seniors, and they are the one most of the time that would kind of like look after the younger ones
Right.
until the coaches come on certain days or the conductors come on other days.
Right.
I think it's more common in high school, but most of the high school bands hire professional conductor and professional coaches.
Right.
So they would come, and then and same thing with the college ensembles as well.
Right.
Not the music school, but the regular university
Right.
bands.
Right. But they are amazing. I mean, the quality of those bands are amazing. you know. So college level. So over here, kids, they would audition into college. They would get into a program. If I mean, in U.S. there are a lot of choices. There are I think most every universities will have a music department. Is that the case in Japan?
No, if you want to do music, you'd really have to go to conservatory.
Okay.
And then there are a few schools that's in the true sense university that has everything,
Right.
But also has a small music department.
Right.
So if you go to a university that does not host department, like music department,
Right.
then you don't have a music professor. So your general general requirement course does not include music.
Right.
So
Wow.
you have no option of taking music as a class. But then there are like if that university has a band or orchestra,
Right.
you could join those places.
Right.
And then those bands, their rehearsal schedule is just as intense. They will probably rehearse every day.
Wow.
For most part, at least 4 hours.
Right.
And weekend, 9 to 4 or like 9 to 6 or
Right.
8 to 10 or whatever crazy schedule that they have, especially if the competition is near, competition's coming up, or like before their regular concerts and special performances. And
Wait.
and-
Let's back up a little bit. I forgot to ask you this. So at high school level, junior high and high school level, in the U.S. we have this thing called solo ensemble competitions. Is there equivalent in Japan? Do they have competitions all over Japan?
we have band competitions, and that's huge.
Yeah. I know about that.
and-
Yes.
Yeah, it's just huge and incredible, and a lot of pressure and everything.
Right.
We do have solo and ensemble equivalent,
Right.
but it's not as participated as much.
Right.
I don't think they're a big solo thing,
Right.
but ensemble thing is a little bigger.
Yeah.
But it's like regional competition, maybe up to the state level, and not that
Yeah.
publicized or celebrated as much as the
Right.
band competition.
Right. I know marching band is huge in Japan, right?
Depends on where you go. Yes, there
Right.
are certain places that marching band is very strong, and
Yeah.
we have that tradition as well.
And they do there are equivalent over here. I think marching band in the U.S. they on the football field they do all kinds of maneuvers, and I think in Japan, actually this is amazing because I think I have seen a video of a Japanese marching band competition. They did the competition on a baseball diamond, which is incredible because there are no lines on a baseball diamond, right? Well, there are a couple of lines, right? But it's it's just and they are doing maneuvers like precision stuff all over this baseball field, which is like football, American football field, right? There's like yard lines all over the place, right? You can kind of map out what you're going to do, but how are you going to do that on a baseball field? That's just incredible. Anyway, so okay, back to the college level, right? So you're saying that not every university would have a music department at all?
No, that's correct.
Wow. Okay. So is it harder to be a music major in Japan than in the U.S.?
I think much harder, and preparation is much more intense.
Right. So they really have to. Would it be right for me to say if kids want to be a music major in Japan, they have to start thinking about it really early?
Yes, because going in, you need to be able to play the piano, you
Right.
have to be able to sing, and you have to be able to do dictation. You have to know solfege.
Wait, so even if you're like say a tuba player, you still have to know how to play the piano and how to sing.
Yes.
Wow. So they
So in order to get into conservatory, they take piano lessons, and they take solfege lesson or dictation lessons. And if you're lucky, your private teacher will prepare all that.
Right.
And some schools don't require singing, but others do.
Yeah. What are some of the names of the top conservatories in Japan?
The top private one is Toho University,
Right.
Toho Conservatory of Music,
Right.
and that's where I don't know, all the big names would come out,
like our
in
Juilliard.
Japan.
Right.
And then there's also National College of Arts or something we call like Geidai, and that's the public one, the big one in Tokyo.
Right. Right.
And they have, I think they are the only ones that has the Japanese instrument division as well.
Right.
Because all the other music schools only have Western instruments.
Right. The traditional
Yeah.
Japanese musical instruments.
Like koto and shakuhachi and those kind of things.
Yeah. So they're not actually not roughly how many conservatories are there? How many actual college level music schools are there? Not a whole lot, right?
I have no idea, but not as many as we have here in the States.
Right, because in the States, like every university would pretty much have will have a music department.
Yeah, that's not the case.
So there are less opportunities.
Less opportunities, yes.
And there are less slots.
Less slots, less opportunities, more preparation going in.
Right.
Like here, like when I teach music theory for freshmen, like they start from,
they start when they're freshmen.
Intervals, scales,
right,
note values.
Right.
They'd have to know all that.
What's a major
going
third?
in.
What's a major third?
Yeah.
What's a minor third? Wait a minute, you're in college.
So the Japanese music school students had to know going in what those are.
Right. So do they run on the kind of the same system? Because over here, where kids will get bachelor degrees and then they would go there the master, and then if they want to keep going, they would get a DMA or a PhD in more academic and musicology. Do they run on the same system, or most people would just get a bachelor and that's all they need?
Mostly the same, but I think Japanese schools the college is a little more like European schools right now. So
Right.
we don't mass produce DMAs and masters that much.
Right.
The slots are much smaller.
Right.
And so lots of kids that graduate from conservatory, if they are not staying on their college, staying on to become a graduate student at their school,
Right.
then a lot of them would either choose to study in Europe or here in the U.S.
Right. Is it easy to have a musical career in Japan?
If you are in the system, I think musical career is hard anywhere in the world.
Right.
But if you are in the system, you have more chance of making it.
So in the system, you mean actually?
Like I went to whatever college of music, I'm a student of so-and-so,
Right.
and this orchestra needed, extra.
So you have to be a known quantity.
And
over there.
you have to be in the system because most of the work in that field would come through the word of the mouth, or they would hire if they only know you, or they only know your teacher, or
Right. So, but they do have orchestras that audition people.
of course,
And
yeah.
now, if you're a foreigner, well, in this case, I mean, I know in America we like to think like everybody else is a foreigner, right? But of course, over there they would think, Americans, or in my case, I'm Asian American. I would be a foreigner to them, right? Is that easy for foreigners to establish themselves over there, or now I guess winning on audition is a totally different thing. But if somebody who is from America and they just they want to go to Japan and have a freelancing career, is that possible? Or because obviously they're not in the system, right?
Yeah, I think the only way for foreigners to be able to make it there
Right.
is that they have an orchestra job or some college
Right.
professorship or something beforehand, so that you are kind of in the system.
Yeah.
And then they would know you through the title,
Right.
and then through the reputation of that particular school or that particular position.
Right.
Like, if you just wash up there one day and say, hey, I'm a tuba player, can you hire me? Nobody would hire you because they don't know you.
Yeah, well, this is amazing because, I always really want to learn about how musicians, in other places actually get to become musicians. So, yeah, hey, thanks again, Mimi, for talking to us again today.
No problem.
And hopefully, please come back. Please come back.
Okay.
Thanks again. Bye. And this is it for Reasonably Ad-Lib, episode 4.5. Please check out our website, give us a like on Facebook, and if you want to talk to us, just email us. Our email address is ralpodcast@gmail.com. That is ralpodcast@gmail.com. Well, hopefully, see you here again soon. Bye.